Welcome, welcome, boys and girls, men, women,
Yo.
children of all ages, non-binary, all that good stuff. Well, welcome to the first ever edition of the Unmaskables podcast, a book club for comic books. I'm Matt. Joining me is Milo and Inder with their
Hello.
soothing, beautiful voices.
Soothing.
And today, I got to be the lucky book run chooser for the first episode, and I picked one of my personal favorites, one of the best things of all time, the Born Again run of Daredevil from the legend Frank Miller. You probably know a bit of this story because a great deal of it is used in the fantastic Netflix series. Reading this again made me want to go back and rewatch the Netflix series again. But, yeah, it's a good one. It's a little more adult, a little dark, but let's get into it.
So, a couple notes before we get started, and I'll run it through real quick. So, Born Again is broken down into 5 separate issues, which are 227 to 231. We're gonna go through like all of them. We're gonna try to get through them as much as possible. Maybe it'll be 2 parts, maybe it won't. 2 very important things to consider from this is that Frank Miller, as a whole, has been utilized all over mass media over the last like 10-15 years to set the bar for like media today, like the 2000s media of comic book culture. What's super cool about this run is that it was made in 86 or 85 or 86. I
Started
think
in
it was
85,
86.
yeah.
Yeah. And surprisingly, they really did a good job in the Netflix series, like Matt mentioned, of adapting how shitty New York was in 85 and 86. Like Ed Koch Giuliani years post like crime lord shenanigans, and making it their own. But some of like the basis for it is there. Inder, I know that you had like a little bit of a history for us on where we stand in terms of like the the way Daredevil sets up in this comic.
Yeah. Well, kind of playing on to what you were just saying as well about like the tone of New York City at this time. I loved how the Netflix adaptation basically used the incident to create that like backdrop of how like New York's basically ravaged at this point, right? So it's great to see that even in the cinematic universe, Marvel tries to adapt some of their storylines to stay as true to the comics as possible while maintaining like a good I guess viewership for all ages, really.
Yeah.
So kind of going into like where Born Again takes place in the chronology of Matt Murdock, right? It's basically in the center. Like, so a lot of big things have already happened to Matt Murdock at this point. There's been the whole Black Widow arc has already happened. Elektra has already come back. Elektra died, and then Elektra came back to life, and then went to live with the Chaste. And there was the whole Heather Glenn arc at this point. So up to this point, like Matt has had quite a few romances in his life, and they have all been horrendously tragic. So that's like he's already struggling before this point even happens. And so Born Again really starts to dive into Matt's breakdown.
But not of his own doing.
Not of his own doing. Yeah. Matt's a
It's
strong-willed person.
It's funny how Matt Murdock is seemingly the weakest and strongest person in everyone. Like it's kind of funny because like the king. All right, so I guess I don't know. Maybe let's just fucking jump into 227, right? So
Yeah, let's do it.
so 227 is titled Apocalypse. The setup for this is that Karen Page, who's everyone knows her as the delightful redhead in the Daredevil show, is she strawberry blonde?
Yeah. Basically,
Okay.
Oh, the actresses, yeah.
The actress, yes, she's boo, bro.
In comics, she's quite blonde.
Yeah.
She's very blonde, yeah. She basically has left early to pursue acting and has become like kind of like a heroin addict. Not kind of, she's a heroin addict and like she's doing
Yeah, it's not
snuff
kind
films.
of. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a heroin addict and she's doing like snuff films in Mexico and shit, and she's
Yeah,
just
so
like
she went downhill quick. Like
real
it's kind
bad.
of yeah. So like she started off as like this aspiring Hollywood star, and then as honestly tragically happens to many young ladies even in today's day and age, as like especially has been coming out recently, is they start early, they get preyed on, and then they just dive down. You know, Karen became a porn star, addicted to
Right.
heroin.
And it's crazy how they set up the way they set up a very easy way for us to create the drama or like the friction for the story. So the friction for the stories is that Karen Page is like super strapped for cash. She like really is, she's like a fiend. She's like a straight up like just like a heroin fiend, and she sells Daredevil, aka Matt Murdock's information, to some underlings within criminal organizations in Mexico, and of course, they make their way to the Kingpin.
And she sells
Um,
it for heroin.
yeah, like not even a
Like
lot
one,
of heroin,
like
like a
one
little bit
high.
of heroin.
Fix.
Like
A
one,
single
just one
fix.
high. Yeah.
This is how low that Karen's dropped, right? Like Karen is just in the worst possible place that she could be in.
Yeah, well, like what's super funny about her too is like she like constantly talks, like even in that opening scene, she's just like, I know I'm a drug addict, and I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I really need drugs. And you're just like, damn, bitch, like you went downhill.
It's so real though, because like I
It
mean
is.
that really happens with people. Like you get to a point where you understand and you know what you're doing, but at the same time your body's like, you better do this shit or you gonna die.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And so Karen sells off this information. Um, Kingpin tells his assistant Wesley, who is another wonderful character in the Daredevil show,
Yeah.
not as like menacing, I guess, in the comic as he was in the show, because in the show he's a little bit more like intimidating, I feel like.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Matt wakes up and fucking shit's starting to get real fuzzy, like a little weird. That first episode is a lot of
Dude,
weirdness.
the morning. Just imagine having the morning that he had. Well, when Kingpin gets a name, 6 months pass, so he tests the information and then blah blah blah. And of course, like he's gonna find out it's
A
true
lot
because
of
he's the Kingpin.
pieces have basically been moving behind the scenes at this point.
Yeah. So it skips to 6 months, and then you get to Matt in his apartment, and he's waking up, and like the whole world falls apart in the span of like 5 minutes. He's got
Yeah.
mail coming in that's like, "Oh, your mortgage hasn't been paid in 2 months. We're gonna foreclose." Although he knows he's been paying. Uh, Glory calls and is like, "Hey, I'm done with you." Who's his girlfriend at the time? He's subpoenaed as like not even a witness. He's subpoenaed as like he's the defendant. I don't know
Yeah,
what
he was
else.
served papers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was served papers, and then the one that kind of tops everything off is that the IRS freezes his accounts.
yeah,
So
that's
like
the other. Yeah,
he can't pay shit. Like it. I mean, like if anybody felt this, I feel like my father could have told you, like in 2008 when the market crashed, exactly what this day felt like, minus like a bad guy trying to ruin your life.
yo,
Like the
Yeah.
world just fucking ended real quick. Markets collapsed. People are miserable. But the big one in here, which is kind of like where the story, I think, so there's two things that I love about Matt Murdock in this first issue or this first volume is the fact that we learn that Matt Murdock is a socialist. Here's why: he openly admits that he hates money. He's just like,
he
like
does
he
say I
literally,
hate money.
He
Yeah,
does literally say it. Yeah.
he's like, yo, I hate money. This shit's stupid. I hate having to be a lawyer, but I like helping people. Money's like the root of all evil, kind of shit. And the big one, which goes against that Matt mentioned, which was the subpoena, is that there's a detective or a lieutenant, I forget what it is.
Nick.
Yeah, Nicholas Manolis, yeah, who basically said that Murdoch like paid a witness to perjure themselves. And if I'm sure all of you listeners may or not know or may know that if you do that, you are immediately disbarred. So you lose your ability to practice
Yep.
as an attorney. Um, and then that's when I feel like that's when we start to see the first like straw hit the camel's back, where Matt like kind of fissures a little bit and starts to lose his shit slight, not a lot, slightly.
yeah, and you get a little sense that. So if you read this and you haven't been reading Daredevil up to this point, you kind of get a sense from the clips with Foggy, where he's talking about like Matt's been a little off lately, or Matt's been talking a little crazy lately. Like you get the sense that things were already kind of like Matt was a little bit out there anyway. He's been going through some stuff, and then all this hits in one morning. The wild thing is like his first reaction is like, "Oh, let me call these guys. There must be some mistake." And like,
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh yeah." The bank is like, "Oh yeah, can't find your payment info. That sucks." And he's like, "I have the check stamp stubs right here. Like I paid them." And they're like, "Oh, can't help you."
Yep.
I like, I feel like if all that had happened to me in one morning, my first reaction would be like, "Oh, I better go call somebody and see where the mistake was made."
Yeah. And then as you start calling, you're like, what in the grave is happening here? So we kind of push it through, and then side by side, and this is kind of something, Matt, to your point, that was mentioned on the Netflix show a lot, right? Was like that breaking of Matt, where like Foggy starts to become a little bit weird with Matt, and like their relationship becomes strained as a result of him becoming Daredevil, right? Or like really taking on the responsibilities of Daredevil. On the other side of it, Matt's ex-girlfriend or current girlfriend, I think ex-girlfriend as of that episode,
As of like 8 minutes ago, yeah.
yeah, Gloriana O'Brien, which is the most non-Irish Irish name I've ever heard in my life. Basically like just immediately shacks up with fucking Foggy Nelson. Like rebound heavy, just like Foggy, you're the man of my dreams. And like it was only because someone had broken into her apartment, and she doesn't call Matt, she calls Foggy, and then Foggy like, you know, sweeps in his fat glory and it's just like, come here, boo thing. I know exactly. I won't hurt you. And yeah, so now Matt has to go out and find Manolis, right? And he has to ask him these questions about like what what happened here. So basically he like what, dangles him out a window or something?
A little bit later. A little bit later. I don't think he suits
the windows
up in that
later.
Episode.
Initially, he just like broke into his house, like popped open the window, if I remember correctly, and like punched him once or something. And, we don't know at this point, like Nick Manolis' no motivation either.
Right. Well, but that episode we immediately found that Manolis was like, "Listen, Daredevil showed up. Kingpin's like, yo, keep playing the game." And then you really get into the motivation with Manolis, which is that his son has a treatment that is like, or a condition that is uncurable or whatever, needs treatment. Yeah. And that was the bribe for Kingpin, which brings me to a very, 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 very interesting point and theme that I mentioned 5 minutes ago about socialism and all that other bullshit. There is nothing better, I think, than showing how the Kingpin is very good at finding people's weaknesses and like extorting them with money.
Yeah.
Like it's so cool.
Kingpin is the epitome of like endless money to just be able to do whatever you want, influence whoever you want, just control whatever you want. And like that is also very much like it's visible throughout this entire series.
He is genuinely terrifying in this series, in this run. Like they make him out to be just a horrifying person, right? Like this figure who you don't want to fuck with. Like even in the first scene where he gets or he's on the boat and he's like on vacation clothes and whatnot, and like the first panel of the issue, and he adjourns the meeting. He's like, "You're all dismissed." Wesley's like, "Oh, I got this envelope with this name in it who you're gonna want," and like everyone else just like scurries away because they're terrified. Like they don't want to have any part of it. Like that's how you know. But then you get a sense with everything that goes on, just how much power and control he has, and how much power and control he could take over anyone at any moment with what he does to Matt in the span of like an hour. just all hitting at once.
So let's get to the big one, right? The episode ends with Matt coming home. And like, so let's go through the list of crap that has happened to Matt. 1, the IRS cannot find, it like freezes all his funds. 2, he's been served to serve as to be a defendant in a disbarring, essentially, where he perjures himself with a witness. 3,
oh, that's right, he goes to court with Foggy. Yeah, Foggy keeps him out of jail, but he still is disbarred and everything. Yeah,
he's still disbarred. Yeah. 3, his mortgage is collapsing because they can't find the payments for him. And then 4, to add insult to injury, not only has he lost his girlfriend, not only does he have no money, he is no longer an attorney. Don't forget, my man is still blind. He gets home. He gets home, and his apartment blows up in front of him.
By the way, mortgage for what? Rubble?
A house, right? Yeah.
And not only that, like on that still, like up to the point where he gets home and like the ground shaking and everything, we're inside of Matt's head, and Matt's going through this paranoid ass list of things that are happening to him. He's like, no, everyone's in on it. Foggy's in on it too. No, wait, Foggy just helped me. And like you literally see Matt just spiral.
Yeah, he's so distraught already, and then it blows up, and you have like there's like a moment of clarity from him as it blows up, and he's like, I was so just out of my mind because I didn't know who was doing this to me or how it was happening, but now with the blowing up of my apartment, like that's very mobbish. So now I know, like, Kingpin, you just signed your own work. Had you not done this, I would have never known. But now I know all this was you. But he still starts to spiral a bit because now his thoughts immediately go to, well, now all these people who I know are working for
Who
Kingpin.
was in Kingpin's
like
pocket.
he's gotten to them now. So like, we leave him in just an awful, horrible place.
Shout out to Vincent D'Onofrio for playing a fantastic Kingpin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a shame that Netflix couldn't hold on to that series and like all the work that they did in that first and second season, I thought was just mind-bogglingly good. But I want to add one little thing in here, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but that paranoia that you got from the Punisher Marvel or the Punisher Netflix series was very similar to what you got out of this Frank Miller run from Matt. Like, Matt didn't really demonstrate that in like the Netflix series so much, but the Punisher definitely did. And I think they made a very smart choice in like developing characters, especially around Kingpin or around like the negative entities in New York that like mess with people's lives, that really put like a hammer through your head and like just make you want to be like, well, screw the system, screw everybody that's a part of it, because everyone's in on it, everyone get their hands greased, and like that has to end. And I love that perspective from both of those characters. But definitely in this first volume, it was like really interesting. A couple of liner notes real quick on this one. This was the first time that we saw Karen Page in over 100 episodes or issues of Daredevil. So she was last seen in Daredevil 138.
Was it really?
Like, yeah,
I knew
took.
I know
when
it's
she
I know
left
it's
to
a
Hollywood.
gap. I know it's a gap, but I didn't realize it was 100-issue gap. That's a long
Almost 100.
time.
Yeah, so 138 was the last time that you saw her, and she was like a burgeoning movie star to Inder's point. The other fun thing is that it took, believe it or not, literally almost a decade for the writers to rebuild Matt's brownstone apartment. It wasn't until Daredevil Volume 2, Number 8, that they would rebuild Matt's brownstone, and it would become the headquarters for Nelson and Murdoch. Which
Avocados at law.
Avocados.
Avocados at law. Which is definitely gonna we can, like, that's a whole different thing for another day. But so we leave Matt like literally broken, completely just like starting to spiral, and then they aptly name the next episode or the next volume 228 Purgatory. Which, like, when I was flipping through this, so for the seen it, this is like the full run of it. When you're flipping through this and you like, they'll give you the covers like for each volume in there. When I saw Purgatory, in my head I heard Funkmaster Flex, like the horns, like the I'm like, let's go. So I guess we'll run through we'll keep going through the story, right? So now my man's life is ruined. He finds out that Manolis is helping another person, like is basically being helped by another person to frame Murdoch in exchange for medical treatments for his son. But Matt's not 100% sure who the mastermind is, right? So, it's hard for him to actually like get everything together. To Matt's point, this is the episode or the volume where it happens. This is when Foggy and Matt go to court, and Foggy's like, please don't send him to jail. Disbar him. right? And that's when Matt's kind of like, he helped me, but like he took my law practice away. So how
Right.
much did he really help me?
Right.
Well, plus he calls too. He calls and Glory answers the phone like fucking 24 hours after they, after she calls and like breaks up with Matt. He calls Foggy at 7 a.m. and she's answering the phone, cooking eggs and bacon and all that. So
looking like a snack in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, is this guy in on it? But like, also he just helped me. So I don't know. It lends to his very very swift spiral.
Can we just talk about how much of a scumbag Foggy is real quick though?
Foggy is not. I wouldn't say Foggy's a scumbag. I'd say Foggy's like the gentle, naive guy that kind of ends up in this situation. I'm gonna say Gloria's scum.
I mean, he's a little. Foggy's a little shady because like in the first issue, so in 227 or the 226 or 227, the first issue of this run, when Glory like goes to Foggy's place after she gets broken into and blah blah blah, she like tries to grab his hand and all that, and he's like, oh nope, look at the time, gotta go to bed, can't do this. And you're like, oh, okay, Foggy, he's holding it down for his boy. And then like, I don't know, a couple episodes later, they're like full-fledged dating, like Christmas shopping, like
and like up to this point, Foggy's kind of aware of like the shit that's gone on in Matt's life too, so like it makes him a shitty friend at the very least. For sure.
Yeah, like straight up, like if I'm at least waiting 2 months before, bro, like I'm not doing it like the next day. You know what I mean? Like that's just rude, bro. I might even clear it with my homies and be like, hey, guys, I know y'all just broke up, but like, listen, I'm not that good looking. My name is Foggy Nelson, bro. Like, come on.
I gotta do what I gotta do.
Not to mention the literal issue before this, and I brought this up earlier, like the Heather Glenn shit, but that was literally the issue before this is when Heather Glenn hangs herself after she and Matt don't get engaged.
Yeah.
So like Matt's ex-girlfriend literally just hung herself. He was trying to marry her, and then now right after that, I guess some time's passed, he's with Glory, and then Glory just leaves him for not really a real reason, and then just is with Foggy.
I wanna shout out one thing, like kind of within this story that I love, right? So like Foggy says that he does his absolute best to help Matt, and he does, right? Like he's just like, listen, you're not gonna be in jail, you're not gonna do any of this stuff, but like disbar him, so he gets disbarred. Meanwhile, the ride to the sentencing is one of the craziest things that's ever happened. Do you guys remember the subway scene?
Yes.
Yes.
So I also love how they do this in the issue where like the assistant is breaking it down in just ridiculous wording to Kingpin while Kingpin's just sitting in the gym like, yes,
lifting.
Tell me more about his misery.
Dude, my man's like curling like 445s on each side. Like it's not even a big deal. And like I want to read one of them, which is hysterical. So Kingpin asks, and Murdoch does nothing. And the guy goes, nothing, boss. At this moment, I now describe that is. At this junction, the youths do then accost each passenger in turn, admonishing them and emptying their purses and wallets into D'Agostino's grocery store shopping bag. And it's just like, it almost sounds like a villain from like the 40s. Like, yeah, see, he went in and then they admonished him. And then he took him and he beat the crap out of him. Beat him to a pulp, boss. And it's just so funny because it's just like, yes, this is perfect. And like the Daredevil, the Kingpin's just like relishing every moment of this. And it's just fantastic.
Like the guy could have just been like, yeah, they robbed him. But instead, it's like they admonish them of their personal belongings into the grocery bag and persuasively.
So now we get to see like the next. And by the way, during the subway scene, a cop comes on board the train. Matt beats the crap out of him with a nightstick and walks away with the nightstick, which is a nice little shout out because his Billy Club or Daredevil's Billy Club hadn't been seen yet in the episode. In the previous volume, and in this volume it hadn't been seen either because obviously his apartment's blown up, but Kingpin left behind his hero suit that Matt now finds, and that's how like that this was like definitely a message. Matt in turn picks up the phone and calls Foggy, and he's just like, Foggy, it's Kingpin. Something's wrong with my brain. I know it's the Kingpin. I know what I got. kill him. But I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna mess that ass up. Like I'm gonna beat the crap out of the Kingpin. And then when he drops the phone, um, it's the operator saying at the tone the time will be 10:32 in the evening.
Yeah,
So Matt's just slipped.
this is how you know he's
gone.
just snapped. Like he's in a
Yeah.
payphone booth, talking to Foggy in his mind, but it's like he's just sitting there with a phone and the automated like pops up.
Yeah.
He's just talking to Foggy in his head. Like the dude is snapped.
We also similarly get to see Karen, right? So like Karen's in Mexico. She's like running away from the assassins. She's like, and like, it's funny because you don't realize that the same people she sold information to are the same people that are trying to kill her, because that was a Kingpin order. So anybody that knows Matt Murdock is Daredevil has to die.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Only Kingpin can know this
he wanted to be the
information.
only person with the power. Yeah.
Which is such big digginess to like go back to everything. Like that's BDE on roids, bro. It's insane.
Oh yeah. And that, you know, that kind of plays into what Kingpin's real biggest weakness is. It is his BDE, right? Like he's so vindictive that the second like he shows his hand because he's like, I am fucking all powerful. Like and that's how like anyone ever figures it out, right?
And that's
exactly.
you see that in this run too. I guess we'll get more into it when we talk about our thoughts after the fact. But yeah, you
going
see that
back to Foggy too.
Just caressing Oriana on the couch.
I'm putting myself in Matt's shoes, right? And I'm like, I know that Kingpin's doing this. Foggy just got me disbarred, but he kept me out of jail. But wait, what if Foggy just kept me out of jail so the Kingpin can do more shit to me?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
that's a good point.
Putting myself in Matt's shoes, like I can kind of see the spiral, right? I can see the justification of his reasoning, especially with everything that's happened to him up to this point.
It's so true. And I feel like it definitely plays into a much larger conversation when it comes to Matt and Foggy's relationship that, like, personally, I don't think it was ever good. Like, I don't, like, they're friends, but, like, it's almost like, I mean, I don't know. I don't see it so much with dudes, but I see it a lot more with, like, groups of female friends, right? Where there's, like, the pretty one, and then there's, like, they kind of de-escalate in order. And what sucks is that, like, some of them are friends with each other for the wrong reasons. And, like, even the least attractive or the least charismatic one is kind of always hoping coolest, prettiest one kind of goes down in a flame of glory. Just like kind of like when she goes, it's just like, well, she deserved it, screw her. And you're just like, God, Lee, like that's so rude. And I feel like Foggy's the same way. Like Matt's so interesting and blind, but still able to like operate in this like really cool way.
Plus, he's a dang superhero. Like,
yeah, well, he doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know that yet, but he has like feelings about it. So back to the story. Matt goes and confronts Kingpin in his offices, and he gets the crap beat out of him. He got the piss beat out of him. It was so bad. Like he got in a couple good hits, but then the Kingpin was like, "Nah, bro. Like I don't go down like." So what does the Kingpin do? He stuffs him in a cab, locks all the doors, or like cements all the doors, so like it looks like they rusted over.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then he just throws him into the Hudson.
Also, he covered Matt in alcohol and booze. And then put the Billy Club in the cab with Matt. So it looks like Matt like beat up a cop with a Billy Club, went and got hammered, stole a cab, and just like drove off this pier.
Yep. But at the end of the episode, we find out that Matt escapes. And the line that the Kingpin keeps holding on to is, there is no corpse.
Yep.
There is no corpse. And that's when you start to see, I think, two things. Number one is, okay, yeah, Matt's a lunatic officially. He's lost his damn mind. But the Kingpin, in literally 2 volumes, has officially lost, or starting to get hints of doubt in his plan and who he is. And, like, that's, again, to kind of, like, continue to hammer that point home. Like, money can buy you everything, but it can't take all your doubt away. And like the Kingpin's starting to feel that, and like it's slowly starting to like seep out of him very quickly.
It's just like it's obsessive because like you and they mentioned several times throughout this run that at the time neither Daredevil nor Murdock has caused like big losses or anything for Kingpin. He's just kind of like that gnat on the wall.
He's just vindictive.
But it's just like because someone has gotten any kind of win at all over Kingpin or caused him any nuisance, it's just eating at him and eating at him and eating at him. Like he has to get at this person.
What I most enjoyed about these first two volumes is that you get to see in 227 and 228 that like it Matt, more so than any other Marvel character that's based out of New York. Maybe Spider-Man might be similar, right? Because like Spider-Man and Kingpin have like a pretty long history as well. He is the definition of the resilience of that city, especially in the time period. Like it's not so much like because Peter Parker is kind of because he's kind of like from the burbs to some degree. Like he's from where
Queens.
One of our friends. He's from Queens. Like he's kind of like the burbish center of New York. Meanwhile, Matt is from Hell's Kitchen. He is in like the thick of the crap of the city. He's a city boy through and through, and like his only goal is to make sure that the city is restored to former glory, or like that the crap doesn't keep happening. And the Kingpin is that like wart on his face that he needs to get rid of eventually, or he'll die trying. You know, it's like 50 Cent. Like he'll get richer, he'll die trying. He'll kill Kingpin or he'll. So we finished 228 with the Kingpin finding out that there is no body, there is no corpse, and 229, aptly named Pariah, is fucking awesome. Because Matt Murdock is exactly what he's defined as, a pariah. Also, I want to mention before we hop into 229, this was the first time that we got to see Ben Urich. What's his name? The guy who runs the Daily Beast. His name escapes me real quick.
Jameson.
Yeah, Jameson. Ben Urich in the comic is a white guy. In Daredevil, the show, he is a black guy. Personally, the black dude in the Marvel show, I thought did a wonderful job being Ben Urich.
Oh yeah.
This Ben Urich in the comic is a little weaker than the one on the show. Like they definitely propped him up more on the show than they did here in this comic book run.
At first, yeah. So Urich has like his down and his curve is like bloop, bloop.
Yeah. He like he's a little indecisive. Like he likes to plot out like kind of what his plan is and like I guess his escape route from anything like shit hitting the fan, right? So like when he is immediately confronted with stuff, he's very reproachful at first, and then eventually he's like, man, this is the right thing, I'll do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what he is.
Well, it's funny. I mean, like I think Ben Urich is they know what they have to do, but they have a hard time doing it. And then once the evidence is overwhelming, then you gotta step into that and become that person. So what's interesting about Pariah is that it opens up with the way Matt became a superhero, which isn't. I don't know. I think I don't know if I have this backwards or whatever, but like in the comic they set it up where he was like blinded. He was hit by a truck that had like radioactive material on it.
He was hit by the stuff on it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is not what happens in the show.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
They don't spend a lot of time on it because they assume you know the story, so we're not going to spend a half a season.
They actually get
a
little more into it in Jessica Jones.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So they go through like 4 pages of like setting up Matt, getting hit by the truck, his father, coming to his bedside and all that other stuff. And then finally they do a second cover page on page 5 or 6, and it's Matt asleep on the street. And it just says Pariah ! And it's excellent because you're like, what's going on with our boy? Like he's sleeping on the street with homeless people. Is he okay? He's like dreaming about the way he became Daredevil. And then immediately Frank Miller and fucking David Mazzucchelli switch it up on you, and it's Foggy and Gloriana shopping, walking through Rockefeller Center and looking at the tree and all this horse shit.
Not only like sleeping on the street, but like he also got the crap beat out of him by Kingpin. He's got broken bones. He just like broke through glass to get out of a cab that Kingpin put him in to die, and he so like the guy is like 85% dead walking around and sleeping on the street.
Which I don't know if that's as a result of him being getting radioactive poisoning or whatever, but the fact that he could survive that level of ass whooping is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, prop to him. But so the flip side is that like Matt's dead in a gutter essentially, or dying in a gutter. Gloriana and
Right.
Foggy are like walking through Rockefeller, and then
Christmas
all of a sudden
Eve or
Gloriana,
whatever.
yeah, it's Christmas Eve. They're shopping. She gets purse snatched. The guy that purse snatches her pulls out a knife, and then Foggy picks up a bowling ball
Bowling ball.
that says, "What did it say? It was pork
Something
chop." Yeah, pork
Peterson?
chop Peterson.
Pork chop Peterson. Yeah,
Peterson.
yeah,
And just nails my man in the face with it. I think he literally committed a manslaughter, a homicide.
Oh yeah.
And they just keep. The guy walks away, which I think is crazy. But like, what?
Right? Like if this was real life, my man just got what was that? It was like the 3rd episode of Daredevil, right?
Yeah.
Where homie walks into a bowling alley and just beats him with a bowling ball.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
there's a neat little like side like wink wink going on here too, because like it's not a big thing in this run, but there like the whole thing around Foggy having this money anyway is because he's suddenly gotten like all these job offers that are like worth a whole lot of money and blah blah blah, and you don't find out for sure until later. But as a reader, and you're reading through this, you know,
like, how did
Kingpin
Foggy
is the
get
one
money?
giving him all these like making these job offers happen,
Right.
with the hopes of being able to buy him off at some point.
Yep. So we kind of quickly transition through, and you see that Ben Urich finally goes to talk to Manolis, right? And he's just like, I know Matt Murdock. I know who he is as a person. He's a great guy. Manolis, holla at me. Tell me what's going on. And finally, Manolis starts to break. What's really interesting, though, is that the nurse that's sitting by this child's bedside, Manolis' son's bedside, looks like the biggest Bertha you've ever seen in your entire life. Holy hell. Like, she looks like she is an absolute demon woman, probably able to kill multiple men with her hands. We go through the process. Matt finally wakes up. He sees Turk. Shout out to Turk, who's in every single Marvel Netflix show.
This character's amazing in the shows. I love his character.
Yeah. Turk and Jessica Jones, Turk in The Punisher, Turk in Daredevil, Luke Cage. Like, he is just such a little like scummy rat figure, and they literally didn't have to do much from the shows to me.
Oh yeah.
Because he's just like a little, like, I hate to use it, he's just a little scumbag, like a little scumbag. Like, they steal. What was it? They stole Santa Claus outfits, and they were gonna go uptown, take people.
They were gonna charge
the Salvation
people
Army guys.
Yeah, they were gonna charge people, like, take pictures or just like take money from people as Santa Claus. This was their plan in this
like
issue.
These quick schemes, dude. Just trying to get some quick dollars. Trying to like, oh man, it's insane.
He's brilliant. But Turk, of course, like, Matt wakes up and he sees these guys like robbing Santa Claus. Turk stabs him. So, like, add insult to injury, Matt got all his life taken away, beat up by Kingpin, and now additionally just got stabbed by Turk in a sense.
He like,
in a
of
sense.
all the people that could have killed him, right, or like tried to kill him, my man got stabbed by Turk in a Santa suit.
Imagine how depressed I like personally.
How low is Matt at this point, right? Like, Matt could not defend himself against Turk.
Forget about defending yourself. You're just like, again, if it was me and like, things like, if the IRS was like, yo, bro, we're seizing your fund, my house blows up, and then I get stabbed by a guy in a Santa suit, I'm like, that's it. Give me the rope.
Yeah,
just
he is mentally and physically just absolutely broken.
It's gone.
Yeah, for sure. So Matt is going through his whole process, whatever. Karen in this episode or in this volume gets picked up by like some guy who's like a weapons runner.
Yeah, she's trying to get back to New York. She's trying to get back to New York at this point, because even after all this time, with killers after her now, she doesn't know it's from the Kingpin, but with killers after her now, her only thought is Matt can save me. Like, Matt, I got to get to Matt. Matt's the only one that can save me. So yeah, she's trying
issues later.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Yo, dude, hashtag screw Karen Page.
Also, like, screw Foggy and Karen, because like they're two of the most. Like, if anything, I feel like Pariah wasn't so much describing Matt; it was just describing Foggy and Karen. Like, it's just like they're absolutely describing the people that have never been good for Matt, but Matt has such a big heart as a character
Yeah.
that he's like bound to save everybody because that's who he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, Karen meets this guy. He's like, listen, I will help you get to America. She's like, great. She knows that she's gonna have to give a couple handies and whatever else on the way up there. It just is what it is. She's been doing it for a while now, selling her body for drugs. So Karen's like, very okay, fine. Like this, it'll get me where it gets me. Flip side, simultaneously, that big Bertha lady that we were talking about in the hospital, Eric and Manolis, kills Manolis.
Yep.
She kills him, and then she breaks Ben Urich's fingers.
Oh, she doesn't.
And
She doesn't kill Manolis yet. But
No?
she puts him like in a body a body cast essentially in the hospital.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And she breaks Urich's fingers and makes Urich watch Manolis getting just crushed, every bone in his body just broken.
And of course, in order for us to kind of wrap up the episode or wrap up the volume in the best way possible, two things happen. The first of which is that Matt finally stumbles into the gym where his father, Battling Jack, was once training to be a boxer. And he starts hitting the punching bag and he passes out magically.
Matt with his broken ribs, bleeding internally, like
magically a nun
Maggie
pops
appears.
up. Maggie appears.
Out of nowhere.
Who, interesting note, this is the first appearance of quote unquote Mother Maggie, or Sister Maggie, however you want to call her, in literally all of Daredevil. This is the first ever.
Yeah, and this is why you see the flashback too of the incident when it happened and Matt was in the hospital as a kid and all, because they detail the gold cross that he got from a woman that he didn't know who it was, but he just knew. And then you find out, I guess we haven't gotten to the next issue yet, but you find out early in the next issue when he's laying there kind of recovering, he knows the feel of that gold cross, and he knows the smell, her smell. It's the same smell that she had, years ago when he was a kid, and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And he knew. So thankfully they don't take long, dragging this whole thing out. Like Maggie, 2 pages later, he's like, "Yo, you my mom?"
Yeah. Which it's almost like, I mean, Horton Hears a Who or whatever, I don't know which one, is Dr. Seuss fucking book. Like, it literally reminds me of that, where he's just like, "Are you my mother?" And she's just like, "Nah." But Matt being Matt, he's like, "I heard her heartbeat." And it didn't,
he knows.
He knows, but 229 finishes with the Kingpin's just massive body working out again. Yo, I want to be rich just so I can work out as much as I'd be swole, bro.
100%.
Swole. But what's interesting is that he talks about how that day, because it's literally from when they drop him into the Hudson to when this episode or this volume ends, only 12 hours have gone by, and the Kingpin's just starting to stew on all this crap, right? And he's just like, "There's no body." Now Kingpin's real pissed because he's just like, "Yo, if I can't find this, I'm gonna pop. Now I'm gonna make hell rain loose because this guy's officially become just a fly I cannot get rid of." So that volume ends, and they aptly name the next one Born Again. That's where the kind of the namesake for this entire run kind of happens. And it opens up with Matt basically in a wino recovery, basically an alcoholic's recovery for homeless people.
He's in the church. They show it really well in the Netflix series. He's in the church basement essentially. He's in their little recovery area with their little hospital cots and blankets and the nuns trying to give water to everybody and all that stuff.
It's so 3 things start to populate all in the basement of the church. Karen is on her way to New York, driving through the jungle. Foggy, to your point, Matt, from earlier, finally signs his job. He basically, I have to call it out. He said, "Funny, my hand shook when I signed. Guess it was the salary. Honestly, Glory, I didn't believe they paid me so much until I saw it written down." And she goes, "Sure, and you deserved it, Foggy. And he goes, it's twice what Matt and me ever made together. Matt, how long has he been missing now? And Glory goes, 11 days and 6 hours. So everyone's very cognizant of what's happening with Matt, but they don't care enough to stop their lives and not be scumbags for 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I better go sign this job offer that seems incredibly too good to be true. Like,
and I hate to say this, dude, like even from a legal perspective, you can put out a missing persons. Like it's been enough time. Like,
yeah.
Go look for your boy. So Ben, unfortunately, now is being repaired at the hospital. Karen has been dropped off. All of a sudden, we start hearing the name of a very interesting character that will pop up, which kind of ultimately became what, the Punisher in the Daredevil series, right?
Nuke?
No.
Yeah.
You see him in Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
In Jessica
in
Jones.
Season 2 of Jessica Jones, you see him. He dates the blonde friend for a little while. And then they go to the... I don't remember if they use the pills so much as the little inhaler thing.
Yeah, right.
In the series, but yeah.
Yep.
But he still says, like, give me a red.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll get in more into that later. Like, Nuke's first appearance is actually in this run. It's 232, and that's the first time Nuke is introduced, period, in a Marvel series.
Yeah, which it is it's interesting to think about how in this run specifically, while we're attached to Matt, this is also more of a Karen and Ben centric volume, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which I love because finally you start to see Ben's in a really tough place, right? So Ben is an older man. He has been a reporter for a long time. He considers himself a good reporter. And then all of a sudden his phone rings and he's in the middle of like a little group powwow at the offices of the Daily Bugle. And I believe they aptly name her Lois.
Lois,
Lois is her name. And basically
this is savage.
She goes,
she
no, this is wild shit.
Because
go for it, man.
Ben, like, to make so at this point Ben's terrified because his hand got broken. He saw what happened to the cop. He doesn't utter the word Matt Murdock. He doesn't utter the word Kingpin anymore. Like, he doesn't say anything, right? But Manolis calls him from the hospital room and is like, hey man, I can talk now. You haven't reached out for the past couple of days. Like, I want to tell you my story, blah, blah, blah. Little does Manolis know, this nurse, Lois, is right outside the room and hears that. So she takes it as, okay, well, Urick's willing to write this story because she doesn't know Urick has, like, given up on all that stuff. So she picks up the phone with Urick on the other side and says, my employer would like you to hear something. Sets the phone down and strangles Manolis to death right there with Urick listening. It is so savage. And then she picks the phone up and says, thank you for listening, Mr. Urick, or something like that. And it's so savage.
It was twisted.
And it's just like they depict Urick as just mortified. He's just frozen. Yeah. Like, he doesn't know.
The panels do such a great job of him going from like regular color, slightly red, to like super red.
Yeah.
And then like while he's like thinking about it, it's almost like he's thinking about it in like murderous terms almost, right? Like the coloring, everything is just so intelligent. That, like, now he's officially fucking freaked.
Yeah, he's just listening as it happens. And he even describes like the last like raspy gasp he hears in the phone and like
the rattle.
Just this horrible sound of him that he has to listen to. That's wild.
So Ben's in this like predicament now. He's like completely traumatized based on hearing this murder. Now Karen's in New York. She meets up with Foggy. Foggy's a dumb little bitch as far as I'm concerned, and so is Karen. So it's finally the meeting of like the dumb posse.
Idiot sidekicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They finally have met, and Karen's like, I need to find Matt. My pimp, he will not let me go. I need Matt. Matt's the only one that can save me. Foggy's like, no, I'm going to help you too because I've already saved one. And it's just like, no, Foggy, nah, bro. Like,
you're Matt's ex-girlfriend too? Let me scoop you up real quick.
He's like, I'm all about trifectas. Do you know about triangles? Because I'm all about this. Ben finally admits that he's kept the cast on for too long. His fingers are fine. whatever. He's just like traumatized from like this woman Lois breaking his fingers. He's traumatized from the murder. He doesn't know what to do. Kingpin at the same time is starting to plot like to bring in some guy from Nicaragua to like settle the score against Daredevil or just to like make him hurt even more. Matt finally in the last few pages is in recovery at the church and he's starting to look a lot better. And this is when the confirmation comes, right? About what's her name?
Maggie.
Maggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, being his mother, which is very nice. And it's not as touching as it is on the show. It's just kind of like, yeah, she's my mom.
Yeah, in this series, it's very much like just a thing that happens. Like it's not like it's not even some big reveal. It's just like a thing that happens.
Yeah.
Which to some point too, I like, and it's kind of funny. Like usually in media, we have this need to like really draw out stories and like really be like,
right.
Oh, we need the heart wrenching moment, and we need the reconnection.
They go for the big shock effect, the shock reveal, but like, and that's one of the things that I like about this series in general, right? Like, there's a lot of big things that happen that they just kind of like, it happened. Like they don't need to do this buildup of dramatic suspense because the overarching story is already ridiculous enough, right?
Absolutely, and to like a larger point, it's incredible to see how like in 2 panels or 3 panels they just gave Matt a mom.
Yeah.
In something that they hadn't done in 200 plus volumes. All of a sudden, Matt Murdock now has a mom, and it happened in 2 panels. Get over it. Let's move on.
Well, it's like it's a nice touch to like the whole born again thing and like him recovering and being like
true
reborn here. So like things that kind of piece him back together is he learns that he has a mother, and then you find out like in this issue, like Karen makes it back to him, and like despite the fact that they're really both messed up through this whole run, and they're both messed up separately, and the whole thing with Karen is I have to get back to Matt so Matt can save me, blah blah blah. But like really, Karen is what ends up saving Matt, kind of, along with finding out he has a mom and all this other stuff. Like it kind of pieces Matt back together. So it ends up, it's not really a big reveal, but it is it's a really nice little piece stuck in there for him becoming this new man that he becomes.
So we find out that Matt has a mom, and then we close out that volume and we head into two. So here's a quick disclaimer or note. 232 and 233, while connected to this story, are not really like what you would call canon, right? Like they're connected in terms of like the Karen Page, Foggy Nelson, Daredevil kind of like resurgence. But 232 and 233 are a little bit disconnected from this Born Again kind of series, but they're included in the anthology. They kind of continue the story of Daredevil's resurgence.
Yeah.
And 231 is like the great culmination.
Yeah, right. And it ultimately gets to 232 and 3 get very, very. Whereas so far you've had like this dark, gritty, like Frank Miller story. The last 2 issues get really like comic booky, like all hell's breaking loose. But ultimately, you get to the end, like you get to the goal of Matt being able to turn it around on Kingpin and all this stuff.
Yep.
But these last 2 issues are very, the pace is very different. The tone is very different.
And that is ultimately why they are included, because really the arc of Born Again is Matt versus Kingpin. And so it starts off with Kingpin having the upper hand, and it ends with Kingpin's defeat, essentially.
So 231. I love one of the liner notes that I read for this, which is, I'll give it to you. Actually, this is from one of the fandom sites that I have, right? And it goes, following Manolis's death, Karen Page finally arrives in New York City, having hitched a ride with a pornography whose name is Paolo Scorsese.
I love that his name was like Paulo.
Yeah. The names.
Paulo Scorsese or whatever. It's amazing.
It's a very
it's so
name.
good. But Scorsese is even funnier because it's just like, the levels of ridiculousness here is too good. So 231 saved. the first opening scene, right, is very much similar to the Netflix series, right, where Matt's like back to working out, hitting the bag, just trying to be like my dad again. Miss my dad, getting in shape. Miss my dad. Got a mom now. Got to save everybody. Gonna be cool. But on the flip side, the Kingpin's people are finally starting to turn on it, and there's a board meeting, and one of the guys finally uh, pipes up, and he goes, "There's nobody in this room who questions your authority or your judgment, Mr. Fisk. Nonetheless, certain allocations of personnel and funds have come to attention of the board. And well, sir, there's been a lot of talk about Matt Murdock." And you start to get this impression that the people who work for Fisk or Kingpin are starting to turn on him, right? Like
Yep.
they're like, "Yo, you're bad for business, bro. Like you're spending
wasting
way too much
time on this. Yep.
not only time but money,
Resources, all of it,
and it's messing up our business. You know what I mean? Like, and we're gonna get to one of another here that I think is definitely going to get brought up, which is the property factor of New York City.
Yep.
Which I think is fascinating that like Frank Miller even brought up in this comic book. But I'll bring it up when I get there. So basically, Ben Urich finally writes a story about the Kingpin. Right? It's like a 6-part series. They called it The Kingpin of Crime, which again was covered in the Netflix series as well. And this is where Ben Urich finally starts to take down, from a media perspective, Carlton Fisk. On the flip side, guess what? Lois ain't done. Big Lois, our Bertha Boo, she ain't done with Urich. So what does she do? She breaks into that, hangs. She literally hangs Ben Urich's wife, which is the most visceral comic book panel I think I've ever seen in my entire.
Yeah.
Yo, like my man. Also, number one, Ben Urich's wife does not look like a small-ish woman. So for her to be hanging from the shower head is incredible. That shower head is very strong. Good for the architecture of New York City in 1986. But then, of course, who comes to the rescue? It is a revitalized Matt Murdock, right? And Urich is like intimately aware of what's happening. On the flip, he goes and he busts someone out. Carlton Fisk goes and busts someone out of a mental institution. I'm unclear as to who this character. Can you, either of you guys, give me a little?
I think it was just supposed to be a random nobody.
Yeah, he pulls
there was never a name to the face. It was just a random psychotic patient that he busted out to try to get basically straight on Matt.
Yeah, this is where it really differs from the series that you saw like on Netflix, because Netflix like pulled the idea, but they made it a thing with Bullseye and all that stuff. Yep. Like in this the comic run here, like there's really no name to this guy. It's just like some psycho he pulls out to put the suit on.
Yep. And it's partially because Bullseye already exists in this. A long time ago. Bullseye killed Elektra, and that happened way before this. On Fisk's orders, by the way.
Oh, true.
Yeah,
true. So they make a phone call to the guy who makes Daredevil suit, and Matt's already there at the costume shop, and Fisk is like, "Make the Daredevil suit," and it
old Melvin
turns around.
Potter.
Yeah, old Melvin Potter, and Matt's there, and he goes, "Melvin, make the costume. No one's gonna get hurt. I'm gonna make sure of it." And now all of a sudden you're starting to get finally the culmination of all the characters finally coming together, right? So again, Foggy being a little biatch. He's got Karen Page, who's puking her brains out as a result of being sick. She literally is dope sick at this point, just like puking and looking like, bro, in the comics she looks like trash.
Yep.
Like she looks like hot garbage.
Yeah, they definitely do a very good job of making her appear like a junkie all through this, and like detoxing too through that whole process.
Yep. So Karen's pimp, or whoever the hell he is, that's been housing her in New York City, is waiting for her outside of Foggy's apartment, and she sees him. And all of a sudden, you have cop cars showing up to kill Foggy and Karen. You have this mentally insane person who's going to dress up as Daredevil and murder some more people to give Daredevil a bad name. On Fisk's orders show up, and you have Matt show up, right? All of these people are just starting to culminate on this one apartment building. And what ends up happening is, which is super funny, the pimp can't keep it in his pants, so he literally pulls out a sawed-off shotgun and a handgun, and he's like, you know what, blammo, I'm the realest dude in this block. Like, I'm here to get mine. Where's Karen? um, and like it just goes crazy. Meanwhile, the lunatic, he beats the crap out of his handler.
His handler,
Yeah.
He beats the crap out of Fisk's handler. He busts into the apartment. Matt fights him off. Karen's just like, well, maybe all I need to do is just get a little bit of heroin and I'll be fine again. So like she goes through like a thinking about relapsing while like all this chaos is ensuing because she can't cope with reality.
Yeah, that's like her vice, right? She's like, well, I'm gonna die. This is where I die anyway, so like I might as well get high so I don't feel it. Like I think her exact words are like, I won't feel the bullet or something like that.
Yep.
Yes. And of course, Matt just beats the crap out of everybody, saves the day. And what does Ben Urich do? He writes the story, right? So he continues to really dig Carlton. Yeah, he continues to dig Carlton Fisk a deeper and deeper hole.
What? The baseball player?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Damn that guy.
I don't know why. You're right. I just keep doing it. And it's very annoying. Wilson Fisk.
Wilson.
Fuck me, man. God damn it, Carlton Fisk. I don't know why. I think as like going through baseball cards,
hatred, dude.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. So, like I mentioned earlier, 232 and 3, while they're not like canon to this story, they're very much in line with what happens, right? So, like, Matt's back. He's back. Matt's back in 231. The episode or the volume is saved. He's there. He's ready.
He's got his suit back. He's got his Karen back. This man's ready to go.
He's back, baby.
Mostly, kind of.
Yeah, kind of, to some degree, right?
About as sane as he's ever been.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, too, is, like, he doesn't have a union with him, right? Like, it's not like things are back and they're normal. Because they're never going to be normal, again, as far as Matt's concerned. Like, he feels like it's better if he stays separate from them. If he kind of exists as almost a guardian angel to these people, because he recognizes that if he gets too close to them, they're always going to get hurt.
Right.
But what's funny about Maddo is that since Wilson Fisk knows who he is, they're always going to be targeted. They're always going to be, just names on a list that Fisk is going to want to cross off.
Yep.
So finally, in 232, you have the episode or the volume called God and Country. You meet a few interesting characters. Nuke, who's aptly named Frank Simpson, and a couple of other of Kingpin's henchmen. Lois, obviously, you already know. Excuse me. The military gets involved in this. So, because of Nuke, exactly. Of course, Fisk's connections know no bounds, so he picks up the military's like, yeah, we got you. We're going to send our boy Nuke, who's in Nicaragua murdering civilians.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Which, do you know what the call out to this is?
The man has a kill counter on his gun. Like,
that he resets regularly.
That he resets between fight. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Do you know what the call out is in this episode?
I don't.
It's part of the Iran-Contra scandal.
Oh, right.
So this is the setup for a lot of the politically, and again, we're going to get to that point where we talk about some of the other things. Frank Miller includes not only Iran-Contra, but he also some of the I want to say the genocides essentially that the U.S. military committed in these countries during the 80s, when they were just like wiping out indigenous villages because they were supporting pro-people governments or whatever, and they're like, nah, bro.
Right.
And I didn't realize, like, I didn't this heavily politicized until I read, because like the Batman runs aren't like this. Like, this is very different, I feel like.
Yeah,
DC
this is like...
tries to stray from non-major, I wouldn't say non-major, but like some of the more political stuff in a lot of their runs. Like, they try to keep it localized to like more social issues more than like bigger, like picture the world per se.
Yeah, and I mean Marvel's
And
not afraid to like get into the political stuff either. Like a lot of Cap stuff is political. I mean, hell, the man started by punching
Right.
Hitler. Like a lot of the
yeah,
political, yeah, like a lot of the political stuff and a lot of the social issues and political issues going on. Like Stan Lee was never one to shy away from that stuff, and I mean he created, you know, characters to be different because they were different, to say, you know, hey, whatever. And then like he wasn't afraid to make statements with his books. Like you see it with Iron Man, you see it a lot. You see it in the little bit more modern stuff, like the Civil War and everything like that. Like, you know, should we sign these papers to give our identities and like all this other stuff, blah blah blah, political
yeah.
issues. But yeah, they're not afraid to go there, and yeah, they kind of, it's weird. I don't want to get political on the pod, but it's funny reading something from the mid '80s and
Oh
being
yeah.
like, wow, this really reminds me of a certain group of political supporters in 2020. It's like,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
is it our America and our boys?
Yeah, 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 yeah. But that, I think, to a larger picture, and maybe, I guess, if I don't know if we're running long, but like we can kind of make this a sub episode. These last two volumes, Matt. I don't know how you want to handle it. I think we're at like what, an hour right now.
105.
Okay, so I think we can clear these last
I
two
think we can.
volumes
Yeah.
in half an hour. But what's really interesting in this one, in God and Country, you set up two things, and I think this is almost where maybe the Strawberry Blonde of Karen Page comes into play. So yes, they introduce Nuke. You do have this like big pro America, just murderous idiot showing up to like get called in from like some foreign country genocide to New York to do the same thing against poor
To
people.
commit
Which
genocide.
which again, to a larger point, like what's really different in 2020, right?
Yep.
You know,
Now, a big
this is a
factor of
comic book
Nuke
version.
is that Nuke on his face wears the American flag. Like it's
Yes.
painted on his face, or it's tatted on his face. Either way,
Yeah,
he's got the
I think it's
flag
painted.
on his face, and that plays a major factor into some of the stuff later.
Yep. So Karen's now back with Matt. They're living together, kind of, I guess, or like they're staying together someplace. And to go back to what I was about to say, where the Strawberry Blonde of Karen Page comes into play in the Netflix series is I feel like they combined Karen Page from this comic with Gloriana
Glory.
of this comic. Yeah, because Glory now is working as a photographer with the Daily Beagle, or Bugle, Daily Bugle. And she's there when they go to interview Lois, and Lois loses her. Basically, like some dude shows up and he's gonna like kill everybody there. Murders Lois because like Lois was gonna talk, and then Ben out of nowhere stops this murder from happening, and just like Glory's just like snapping pictures.
Yeah,
just,
she's
like,
in the
being a
face of
little,
him
like,
while he's shooting, and she's like, "Oh, better get this picture."
yeah, this is good news. Um, so yeah, Matt's now working in a kitchen to drug well, not drug addicted, but like I guess being drug cleaned
Yeah,
girlfriend,
recovered.
lover, whatever, recovering girlfriend, whatever you want to call her. And of course, Matt's like finally in a good place. He's working. He's got regular box at home. He's, doing what he's doing. And Nuke shows up out of a helicopter, just starts shooting the place up.
Yep. He like hears it coming, right? So he hears the helicopter. He's like, I don't like what they're saying, and then Nuke pops out, starts shooting,
Yep.
and they have this confrontation. I believe this is right when the Avengers show up, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I was going to get to, yeah. So before the Avengers, of course, they blow up the apartment that he's living in again.
Again, right. By the way,
Karen,
just rebuilt or whatever, or different apartment. but
Yeah,
different
Screw it.
apartment.
Yep.
Different apartment. Which, by the way, is the apartment that they actually, like that top floor.
Yeah, with
yeah.
the cross from the
Yeah, that it's the same one that they use in the Netflix series, which I thought was really smart. But of course, they blow it up. Karen's fine. She's like using the Daredevil costume to like cover her naked body because she was asleep in bed or whatever. Matt leaves his jacket on her while she's like concussed and half dying, puts on the Daredevil uniform, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm about to go ahead and fight this man." And then that's it. Like it's just like the first confrontation between like the initial minutes or like whatever of the Nuke of the Nuke Daredevil confrontation.
What's crazy is
That's
like
it.
at this point, like it pretty much ceases to be a Daredevil story
Right.
at this
Yep.
point.
Yep.
Because
it
like
starts to transition into a Captain America story.
yeah, like they're fighting and he's like braining all hell in Hell's Kitchen, and like Cap and Iron Man and Thor show up to stop the madness because Daredevil can't take this guy down, and like
Well,
from there it's
so
like a Captain America story, not so much.
Yeah.
so 233 is called Armageddon, and uh, three very great Avenger characters show up. Captain America, Thor, it's Iron Man as well, right?
Yeah.
And these three guys, they go, listen, we got to pull him out. He's one of ours. And Daredevil's like, on whose authority? They're like, listen, federal authority. This guy's ours. We're taking him back. It is what it is. And Matt's like, oh, okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
I love the
Matt
panel where
like stands there
Daredevil's
for a
holding
second.
him.
Iron Man's got his
Yeah.
hand charging up, and he's like, "Well,
I love
guess
that.
I'm not stupid."
Yeah, I love that panel. He's holding
Yeah.
Nuke, and Iron Man looks at him, and he's like, "We're taking him," with his hand up, and Daredevil's
Yep.
like, "All right, you're taking him. Yeah,
Yep.
we're good here."
He's like, I hear the hand start charging up, and then, nah, I'm good, thanks. All you.
in the panel, he goes, Iron Man goes, you have 5 seconds. And Matt narrating goes, there's a soft hum as computer circuitry generates enough power to level a building
Yep.
and holds it.
And then he's like, "We're cool,
Yep.
bro."
Yep.
We're fine. It is what it is. So finally, we get to the part that I really want, which is they're in a sauna. And by they, I mean Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and his homeboys, his crime organization
his gallery.
people.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, an older, listen, we might go for a family every once in a while. Nuke just did. He adds, have you any idea what your vendetting is costing us in the drug trade? He goes on to say, you've endangered all of us and cost us millions just to harass that blind shyster. He finally adds, I worked very hard to get Hell's Kitchen. So in the 80s, go ahead, Inder.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna add in. I would venture to say that this same man in the sauna and the person that spoke up earlier were probably a direct inspiration for Owlsley on the TV show.
Yes,
because Owlsley was the only one that really spoke up and said basically almost these exact same lines to Fisk.
Yep. Yeah. I honestly, I think they pulled a lot from the comic book into that, in terms of lines. But basically, in the 80s, there was a large repurchasing that happened. Business people, and some would even say crime syndicates, right? And some of the construction that happened in New York was oftentimes facilitated with bad money, depending on your take on it or how it was worked out. But a lot of the union jobs were, and this is very well known by the mafia and by crime syndicates. Some of them were financed by our current president. Whether or not he knew who was actually doing the labor work really isn't up to us, right? But they really hard to buy back shitty neighborhoods to redevelop them. But while they were redeveloping them, they were still feeding those neighborhoods drugs. So this panel or this conversation is such a synthesis of like the crap that happened in New York City during the 80s, and to a much larger point, kind of the preservation of what New York turned into, right? Like post whatever. So yeah, we move on. Matt's back with Karen. She goes to the church where he was treated. Matt leaves, and he's like running to go, I guess at this point, kill Nuke. And he's aptly stopped by Captain America. And now Captain America has questions. Captain America is just like, if he's under federal custody, like, is he one of ours? So he goes and he talks to his superior. And it turns out that the superior is on the phone with Wilson Fisk.
Yeah, okay. So like basically up to this point, kind of what happens is like that same scene, right? So was that when he confronted Matt and he started asking Matt questions?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was Matt heard Cap coming. So Matt started to run from Cap because he was like, this is not good. And then so he figured out that, well, Matt, I think Matt did not know Cap knows who he is at this point, right? So Captain America figured it out basically after following him the entire time. And then when he confronts him on the roof, Captain America basically says like, I need to know more about this guy. Like, what do you know? Because and then Matt basically starts to walk away, and he's like, Captain says he's wearing the flag, and that's my issue. And this
Yes.
is where we start to dive into like Captain America's whole I represent the flag, I don't represent the people behind the flag idea.
Which, if anybody listening, if you can take a more American approach than not the person, but rather the institution, Captain America is literally like he is America's hero.
The
100%.
American dream is what he fights for.
Exactly.
And that's what he believes in. Anything else is just propaganda.
Yeah. So Captain America breaks into the headquarters, looks at this computer, sees that this guy Nuke, or Frank, whatever his name is like basically, just like a drug-induced lunatic that's been carrying out hit missions for the military. Matt shows up, and then while this battle between Nuke and Captain America is happening, the military dispatches helicopters to basically do away with Captain America and Nuke simultaneously, right? Like, we're going to take care of both of our problems. Cool. Daredevil steps in. He throws him in a cab, which is a nice shout out to like 4 or 5 episodes before, where like he almost died in a cab, and now he has
dead in a cab.
Yeah, and now he has a dying man in a cab because Nuke is like now dying, and he brings him to Urick's office and he just throws him on his desk. And of course, what does Urick do? He writes the story, and the headline is my favorite in this panel. He writes, "U.S. Army super killer, Kingpin implicated in Hell's Kitchen slaughter." And now the Kingpin is livid.
Walls start closing in.
Yep. And I mean, it's funny. Like, so the last few panels in this run are basically the Kingpin being told that like there are citizen groups, Senate subcommittees. He gets testimony from disgruntled employees, bagmen, numbers of prison runners bartering away prison sentences, speaking more swiftly than the Kingpin can kill, and the faces of the lieutenants grow sullen and hostile. His command are beyond obeyed, but far too slowly. So basically, slowly but surely, the law finally starts to come down on the Kingpin, which the one thing that Matt valued more than anything, having taken care of, which is like absolute sweet, just sweet full circle justice for Matt Murdock. And of course, the 233 ends with him and Paige walking down the street. A now healthy Karen Page. It looks like she's put a little bit of weight on. Boo's looking fine. She's looking a little thick. Walking down the street.
She lost that fresh heroin look.
Yeah.
She lost that fresh heroin look, and that's the end of the Born Again. What I will say though is that there is
a post.
There's a callback episode. It's not a post chapter.
Right. Oh, right.
226. Yeah. So it's 226. I don't know how to call this.
It's not really like the biggest reason it's in there is because Frank and Dave Mazzucchelli worked together. It was the first time first issue they worked together on it before this run, so they kind of tossed it in there for the sake of tossing it in there.
And it's a beautiful story. It doesn't actual arc of what we're talking about, but I love this only because like I could have spent like hours just like pulling out all of the societal bullshit and like the big like whatever themes that may or may not be in there, that stories. But I love this. This was actually my first time full through. Like I've read bits and pieces of it because of the show.
Yeah.
But this was the first time I read it straight through, and I loved it. I don't know what you. Matt, I know you've read it before.
Yeah, I had read it before, but a very, very long time ago.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I don't necessarily like I love up until like 231 ish. I love like the whole Frank Miller tone, of course, the dark, the gritty, the very serious, like everything that goes down until it gets really comic-y with like some of the Avengers showing up and like this and that happening, and like that part loses me a little bit because I think it's such a 180 from the tone that you've had through like 4 or 5 issues up to this point. So like that part loses me a little, but up until that, it's probably one of my favorite runs of any comic.
Looking back, like now that we're in 2020, you know, it's been what 34 years since this comic was released,
Yep.
and really looking back at some of the later runs, like the Cap side story seems more important now because the Cap side story eventually just ended up being. I don't think we actually dove too much into it, but to summarize, he does some research. He on Nuke by himself because he's not actually authorized to do it. He figures out the Nuke was made as part of attempts to replicate the super soldier serum that made Captain America Captain America. So he knows at this point that the government, you know, has all constantly been trying to, you know, continue to advance super soldiers, and not yet, but further down the road, this certainly plays a factor into Civil War.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to like a much larger degree, which like we talked about before, but like it really does set up a lot of the internal conversations that end up happening when it comes to like larger issues. And I mean, not for nothing, I have a book that I used to read, which is I had it to take it for a philosophy class, and it's like the philosophy. And like, if there's one thing that Matt Murdock teaches, the philosophy of superheroes.
Philosophy of superheroes.
Yeah, specifically, it's like it starts with like Superman. It's like very Superman based, but like if you use that like the same principles that like they stand for what they are and they do their best. Like I said, the end of this is Kingpin getting justice served by the law, not by Daredevil. And like anytime that you get that, like yeah, it is a bit of, like there isn't a final Kingpin Daredevil battle. And there really wasn't on the show to some degree, right?
Well, it kind of had the same ending because he could have, and he
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you learn that like the only to feel success as a superhero is to let the world do what it needs to do to bad people. So I was definitely I definitely enjoyed the whole arc of it. Do you got anything from the chat, Mateus?
Not of substance, no.
Oh boy. Tell me what's not a
shout out to Men in Tights.
Yo, listen, man. If I had to pick a superhero, I mean, you already know who my favorite. But I mean, Daredevil's like a close second, maybe third. Probably
third. A solid superhero, and I like, you know, this whole story arc kind of dives into it, and it's a prominent thing across comics. But I like comics are generally made targeting teens, right, or like younger readers, people in their developing years, and there is so much controversial stuff that's brought up in these comics, basically to, I don't want to say steer like the reader in any direction, so to say, but like making them aware. So like Karen's whole fall in Hollywood, like that's a huge issue. That's a real world issue, right? And so seeing stuff like that in comics, it's you know, 34 years ago, same thing today, right?
Yeah. It's I think it was probably, this is probably, I would apply it aside from the was very few years ago. It's still very relevant today for the themes that you can pull out of stuff. And to your point, Inder, like if I got this as like a 14, 15-year-old kid and like I'd taken it to an English teacher, I feel like I could have written like a little essay on it when I was in high school. And like, this is why capitalism is bad, because people like Kingpin exist. You know what I mean? Like whatever. I probably would have been cool.
Capitalism leads to heroin.
Or capitalism leads to Kingpin. You tell me which one's right.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I do remember in high school we actually had to write an argumentative essay, and I actually chose Superman versus Batman as like the ideals that they stand for, and I do distinctly remember that essay.
Listen, bro, if there's one guy I can stand behind, violence is good. And my favorite, my favorite character, Moon Knight. So
I'm excited for Moon Knight adaptation in a TV series. You know, I'm surprised they went with Oscar Isaac because he is a bigger name, but I think it'll be very big and something to look forward to.
For sure. I think this wraps up our first Unmaskables Daredevil Born Again episode. I want to should I do it? Should I preview it? Should I preview what we're reading?
Yeah, we can talk about what we're gonna do
Yeah.
for next time.
So we're switching gears, but we're staying in the 80s.
We're staying in the psychotics as well.
Yep.
We're staying in the crazy. 1988. It is now 40 years or whatever, 40 years past the day of the release of Alan Moore and Brian Boland's Batman: The Killing Joke. Now, there is a movie. It's on HBO Max. Y'all can watch it, whatever. But this is probably one of my favorite stories for a bunch of different reasons. I've read this probably like 4 or 5 times, and I wanted to switch from Marvel to DC because, like Matt said, right, like DC generally stays away from the political, and I felt like I could have talked politics on Daredevil for probably an hour by myself, like just like done a Bill Simmons style, like, and you want to know what else kind of thing. So this is my choice. I think it's gonna. I highly recommend that you guys read and watch it. The watch was pretty good. It was one of the first R-rated comic book movies, that like actual comic book movie that was ever released in theaters, which was excellent. I remember seeing it in theaters with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and she was like, "What the did I buy you tickets to, bro?"
Yeah, I was gonna say probably don't let the kids watch.
Yeah, it is very, very dark, very like, and while in Born Again we look at the issue of Matt's like steady descent, like we really see some psychotic stuff in The Killing Joke, and the literal title is The Killing Joke, like,
and also more importantly, one of the first times that we actually story to the Joker, which is fun to kind of uncover. And it's not so much the in the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, but something kind of similar.
That movie never happened.
Yeah, that was a great.
Technically, it didn't ever happen.
You don't like that movie?
That movie was terrible.
I thought the movie was all right until the ending, and I thought the ending kind of ruined the rest of the movie for me. I was like, wait, so really, like this is what we're coming back to? But I'm not going to dive into that in case anyone hasn't seen the movie, but honestly, the ending was kind of meh.
I think we should talk about it on the next episode because I have strong feelings.
Oh, for sure. I think it'll play in.
I have strong feelings for that, the same way that I have strong feelings about the season end of The Mandalorian, which we're not going to talk about either.
Yeah, we're not.
But we will preface any spoilers when we the show or when we talk about the Joker movie.
I'll just hit them with the bleep.
Yes.
There you go.
I'm Milo. I got Inder over here. I got Matt over here. I hope you guys have enjoyed our first Unmaskables. We'll be back in 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Next read.
We will be back in 2 weeks. Our holiday schedule might be a day or two off, but we will, we'll play it by ear. But we will be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're gonna do another Saturday run, the same way we do it on our other sports podcast. Matt, anybody got any shout outs before we go?
Well, shout out to these guys. I mean, this is my first time on the podcast, really, but Matt and Milo host their Uncoachables podcast twice a week, which is a discussion on sports.
Our weeks are getting pretty full quickly.
I love it. Matt, you got anything?
No, I'm good. Keep listening. Our Uncoachables is growing pretty fast on Spotify, so I'm incredibly happy about that. Keep listening, keep following. Hopefully this one will be equally as successful, and we have a lot of fun doing it. Hopefully you guys have a lot of fun listening. And wear your damn mask and get the vaccine. And
holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Stay safe. Also, stay Rona free.
I want to do one
big
shout
gatherings.
I want to shout out Creamy Gumbo, the Rap Snaps icon.
What the
quick ramen with Master P on the front of it. If you don't have this collectible item in 7-Eleven in Belmar, I don't know. I didn't tell you. But definitely don't eat it. This looks horrible.
That's a collector's edition item right there.
For sure.
All right, see y'all in 2 weeks. Be safe.
Happy holidays.
Take care, everyone.
Peace.